Hello friend and future deep dweller. Imagine you're trying to understand a workplace cafeteria. Every day hundreds of employees walk in and decide what to eat. Some go for the pasta, some want a salad, and some just grab a coffee and head back to their desks. Their choices depend on what they like, how hungry they are, how much time they have, perhaps what their colleagues are doing, maybe even what kind of morning they had. In short, lots of people all acting differently. Now let us say an economist wants to create a model to predict what the cafeteria needs to prepare each day. But tracking the behavior of every employee is complicated. So instead, they use a shortcut. They imagine there's just one employee who represents everyone. This representative employee has average tastes, average appetite, average budget. The model assumes this one imaginary person decides what to eat. And whatever they choose is treated as what the whole workplace will do. This is basically how the representative agent works in economics. Instead of trying to model every person in a market, economists often create a model with one fictional average person who stands in for everyone. This person is called the representative agent, and in the model they make all the decisions, how much to spend, what to save, whether to invest, and so on. It is like trying to understand an entire economy by imagining one average worker, one average consumer, or one average investor, and assuming that this person captures what the whole population is doing. So why do economists use this idea? Because it makes the math simpler. It makes the math easier. Modeling thousands or millions of different people, all with different preferences, salaries, goals, and behaviors, is extremely hard. If you assume everyone behaves like the same person, it becomes possible to write equations that can be solved and used to make predictions. So the representative agent is a shortcut. It is not meant to be realistic. It is meant to make the problem simpler and more manageable. But is that a problem? Maybe. The big question is, does one average person really represent the whole crowd? What if some people earn more than others, or spend differently? What if people copy each other, or act irrationally? What if they have different goals, habits, or levels of information? The representative agent assumes away all of that. It assumes we will think and act the same. The model would assume that every employee has the same preferences. So everyone likes the hamburger more than the salad, or values pasta more highly than the soup. But in real life, people have different tastes, react to each other, and change their minds. And when we move from lunch choices to financial decisions, that variation and the way people influence one another can lead to outcomes like inequality, bubbles, or panics triggered by sudden shifts in group behavior. So while the representative agent is a clever tool for simplification, it also hides the complexity of real people. Is the average investor just another useful fable? Like the irrational man we talked about before. The idea of a representative agent shows up all over economics, but especially in finance, where it often takes the form of the average investor. You might have heard phrases like the market thinks or investors expect inflation, but markets do not actually think. Investors do not move as a single unit. Behind every price is a crowd. People with different strategies, goals, and beliefs. Some are short-term traders, some are long-term buy and hold believers, some are nervous, some are greedy, some read earning reports, and others follow TikTok. Yet in many financial models, all of this gets compressed into one fictional person, the average investor. This representative investor is cool-headed, perfectly informed, always calculating how to get the best possible return for the amount of risk they are willing to take. It is a neat idea. It just does not look much like real life. But can one person really stand in for the whole market? Economist Alan P. Kerman has been one of the most persistent voices pointing out the problem here. Back in 1992, he asked the blunt question: whom or what does the representative individual represent? His answer: no one. Kerman explained that assuming one average person can stand in for the whole market only works under very specific and frankly unrealistic conditions. Basically, it works only if everyone has the same preferences, same information, and acts independently of others. But we know that that is not how investors behave. In reality, markets are full of people watching each other, reacting to trends, copying strategies, and sometimes panicking in sync. One way to think about the limitation of the representative agent is to imagine trying to understand a flock of birds by modeling just one bird, and assuming it does not care what the others are doing. But birds respond to the movement of the flock. They adjust, follow, react. So do investors. What happens when we act like a flock of birds or a crowd? Let us go back to the workplace cafeteria for a moment. Imagine your colleagues are all lining up for the new chicken sandwich. You were going to get the pasta, but now you are thinking, maybe I should get that sandwich too. You do not want to miss out. That tiny social nudge, the subtle pull of the group, is exactly what economists call interaction effects. In financial markets, these effects are everywhere. If a few investors start selling, others may follow, prices fall, more people panic, selling spreads, a small move becomes a wave. This kind of herding behavior cannot be captured by a single average investor who ignores everyone else. You need a model that includes many different agents and lets them influence one another. Economists, like Brock and Roelof, have shown that when people make decisions influenced by others, markets can flip between very different outcomes. A model with just one agent cannot capture that kind of social tipping. But the problem goes even deeper. The representative agent also makes it hard to think about inequality. In a one-person model, there is no rich and poor, no big institutions and small retail investors, no hedge funds and pension savers, just one person trading with themselves. That means we miss important questions like who gains when interest rates go up? Who loses during a market crash? What happens when wealth is concentrated in fewer hands? These are questions about distribution, and the representative agent does not do distribution. It assumes we are all the same, or that it does not matter if we are not. But in real life, it does matter. Even Kenneth Arrow, one of the giants of economic theory, warned against relying too much on representative agents. He pointed out that when you assume everyone is the same, you risk overlooking something really important, like who actually earns what, who holds the wealth, and how different people experience the economy in different ways. So why do we still use it? And here's the tricky bit. The representative agent is not used because it is realistic, it is used because it is convenient. It makes the math cleaner. It keeps the models solvable. It allows economists to focus on big picture dynamics without getting lost in the weeds of individual behavior. And to be fair, sometimes that works well enough. Not every model needs to capture every detail of reality, but the risk is when we forget that this model is a simplification, when we start interpreting model results as if they reflect how people actually behave rather than the actions of a fictional person with fictional preferences, we risk losing sight of reality. So as we touched on in an episode about the rational man, these models are fables, useful, sometimes elegant, but still stories about imagined worlds. And when we take those stories at face value, we may miss what is really going on. So what happens when we let go of the average? Over the past decade or two, more economists have started to move away from the representative agent. They are building models with many agents, each with different incomes, preferences, and strategies. Some are cautious, some take risks, some follow the herd, and some go against it. These more complex models can simulate bubbles, crashes, and even other events that arise from interactions, things that never show up in representative agent worlds. So this is a step towards realism, but it also comes with trade-offs, more complexity, less elegance, and harder math. But maybe that is okay, because markets are not elegant equations, they are messy human systems. So who decides in the market? Well, not one person, not one average investor, not a perfectly rational agent solving equations. Markets are made up of many people, all different, all interacting. The representative agent was a clever shortcut, but like most shortcuts, it leaves things out. And what it leaves out might be the most interesting, most important part of the story. To me, it is obvious why this is a fitting concept to dig deeper into through Deeponomics, but why, as an incoming PhD student studying capital markets through a qualitative lens, do I find myself reading and writing about the representative agent? Well, because if I'm going to study how individual investors make decisions, not in theory but in practice, then I first need to ask a more basic question. How do we even define an investor? Is it helpful to start with a fictional average investor who behaves exactly the way the models say they should? Or is that starting point too clean, too detached from the messy social uncertain world where real investors operate? I don't know the answer, but I find it meaningful to ask the question and to explore how these ideas have been developed and critiqued by some of the greatest thinkers in the field. This is what Deeponomics is here to do, to bring these big assumptions out into the light and to see what they look like up close, not to take a side, not to settle a debate, but to better understand the foundations we so often take for granted, and to learn slowly and curiously as we go. But I want to leave you with this. I came across this analogy while reading Kerman's article, and I have to say it stuck with me. I think it captures something important, not just about representative agents, but about economic modeling in general. It is not that these models are useless, but we need to remind ourselves that this is often how they are used. Quote, "A person drops their keys in a dark place, but chooses to look for them under a streetlight, not because that is where they lost them, but because it's easier to see there." That is the risk. The models are built where the light is. But sometimes what we are really looking for is still out there in the dark. Thank you for listening. Honestly, it means a lot to me. I love exploring these theories, ideas, and concepts, and I will continue doing so even if you do not show up, but it makes everything so much more meaningful knowing you stopped by. Oh, and as always, if you liked this episode, please spread the word and follow Deeponomics on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Same name everywhere. Deeponomics. And if you want to reach out, you can email me at info@deeponomics.com. Until next time, stay curious.